Hello, listener. This is Philip King, recording May 5th, 2019. This is a post just to get something off of my chest, out of my head, so I don't have to think about it anymore. It's been building over a long time with me, and it's just hit its peak recently with the release of the recent Avengers Endgame film. And the response to it just sort of has caused me to just have to get this out of my system regarding my views on the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe experiment and the way Disney has just taken over the whole industry and how audiences have changed so much over the past few decades, and it sort of culminates with the monumental success of these Marvel movies in a very, very disturbing way. And I have to talk about it because I'm a former film student. I love film. Um, I studied the film masters of the past and really learned what differentiated film from other mediums. What made film different from radio and stage and television. So, and I really appreciate it as a medium, really love it as a medium, and study it, and I understand that a film is far superior to all the other art forms, in my opinion. And recently, it seems like for audiences, the line has become blurred between film and television, where so many films that come out on a yearly basis feel like TV shows put on the big screen, not in terms of the production quality, but in terms of the sensibility of it, the way the story is presented, the way things are stretched out, the fact that nothing really important happens in the movie. They just want to get you to the next movie. It feels like a TV show. That's a staple of television. Television is not designed to satisfy the audience. It's designed to create a format, a structure, get you addicted so that you just keep coming back week after week after week. Television producers are like drug dealers. They just want to get you hooked so you keep coming back, and they just stretch it out year after year after year. Television is about stretching. Film is about condensing. That's why film is a far more creative art form. But of course, now in recent memory, film franchises have been going on for decades, but recently, it's like these movies have given stretching, a new name, where it's just all about just establishing characters, characters that are based on characters from comic books that already have an established fan base, and then establishing them with a movie, and then making a big movie that where you throw all the characters together in the same pot, and fans of all these characters are supposed to be excited just seeing the characters all interacting with each other. That is not what a movie is supposed to be. That is television sensibility. I mean, just recently, Game of Thrones, the first two episodes of the 8th season was about just bringing all these characters together to Winterfell before the battle starts. I mean, that's the same sensibility of just most of the first two episodes were just reunions between characters to set up the big battle. And that's pretty much the sensibility of these Marvel movies now. The movies aren't meant to satisfy on a filmic level, and it really stands out to me when you really understand the staples of these different mediums. And it really stands out to me, the reaction to these movies and the lack of criticism, the sort of every article I see talking about the Avengers is about how much the box office is. And that really, and if you talk to anybody who obsesses over these movies and you suggest that the movie's not great, they're going to tell you that the box office speaks otherwise. And when someone suggests to you that a movie is great because it made a lot of money at the box office, you're dealing with a moron. Someone that has no argument. When so many awful movies have made lots of money at the box office, that is not an adequate defense at this point. But I remember, I used to listen to the Film Talk podcast with Gareth Higgins and Jet Lo. And over a decade ago, I remember them making a comment about how audiences were going to treat movies like sports. And the box office was going to be something that they were going to root for every week, and they were going to hope that their team won at the box office. They have some special attachment to these movies, and it was not going to be about the quality of the movies anymore, and they were just going to root for them. And that pretty much has become the case. These movies, the audiences who go to see these movies don't go to see the movies because they're concerned, because they like the filmmakers behind them or for the film itself. They go because they're consumers and they're fans of products, and they feel a responsibility to support the product. That is why they go to see these movies. They are obsessed with making sure that these movies make lots of money so that they can keep making them. And they cheer. And when they heard that the movie made a lot of money, they're happy. They feel like they were involved in the production, that their movie won at the box office. I mean, these kind of people wouldn't even understand the fact that there was a time period when the box office was not reported. Audiences didn't know how much money the movies made at the box office. I mean, there's no reason whatsoever why the audience needs to know how much a movie makes at the box office. Unless you're involved with the production business-wise and you stand to make some money from the box office, it makes no sense why audiences would need to know how much money the movie made. And if these people would never question why do they post the box office results. You don't need to know. Just like you don't need to know what the ratings are for episodes of Game of Thrones. Every Monday they make sure to post and let the audience know, oh, this week the ratings were the highest they've ever been. A record number of people watch. Why do audiences need to know that? We don't need to know it. But the fans for these products feel like they've served well. They have such an attachment to these properties. And the people behind the movies have just come up with a genius strategy to not target people who love film, just targeting consumers. I mean, film culture has been in a decline for decades. I mean, the infantilization of culture is more than just, politics or whatever. Film culture has been declining so much. I mean, Stanley Kubrick's last picture, Eyes Wide Shut, and the critical reaction to that was probably the greatest indicator of how much cinema culture had declined by the end of the 1990s. Stanley Kubrick didn't change as a filmmaker, but by the time you get to the end of the 90s, people looked at Eyes Wide Shut and dismissed it like Stanley Kubrick had lost something. He didn't lose anything. He didn't change as a filmmaker. Audiences changed. Audiences had become so juvenile, so infantile, that just didn't satisfy them anymore. If Stanley Kubrick was a filmmaker today, he wouldn't get any attention. People wouldn't even know who he was. Because he made movies, he was perfect for the 60s and the 70s when people wanted experimental filmmaking and directors who really pushed the bounds of acceptability and trying to recreate the form of what a film could be. He was perfect for that era. Is totally incompatible with today's era of filmmaking, where audiences just want something that is familiar, something based on a property and characters they already know, something safe. Film is a director's medium. Television is not the same thing as film. Television is about the characters. Television is not about direction. Film, that used to be the case. Film, the director used to be important to a film. The director's style. Television, you can watch a TV show and watch it from episode to episode to episode. Each episode can have a different director, and you wouldn't even know because all the episodes, the direction looks the same. I mean, look at Star Trek Discovery, where that show has different directors almost every episode, but every episode looks like J.J. Abrams' Star Trek. With all the lens flares and everything, it's visually designed to resemble his version of Star Trek, regardless of what director is in there. The episodes all look the same. Television is not about the direction. It's about the characters and stretching the storyline out, milking it for 10 to 20 episodes or whatever. Film is about condensing, taking a story that might take place over the course of a day, a week, a month, a year, somebody's lifetime, and condensing it down to a couple hours. That takes a lot of creativity. Taking a novel and cutting it down to the bone to make it work as a film. That's the job of a filmmaker. That's hard to do. It's easy to just stretch stuff out. That's why I have far less respect for television than I have for film. So it really disturbs me how the line has become blurred between film and television, where contemporary audiences are so illiterate when it comes to film that they actually watch these Marvel Studios pictures and think that they're satisfying on a filmic level when they're formatted to resemble a TV show. and satisfy on the level of a TV show where it's all about the characters, where people are happy just to see Captain America and Thor and Iron Man and Doctor Strange and all these characters on screen together, just happy to see them. It doesn't matter what they're doing. The movies all have the same politics. They all have the same visual style. I mean, that was the idiotic decision to create a Marvel Cinematic Universe, meaning that they all take place in the same universe, meaning they all look the same. And what made the other comic book movies prior to this experiment great was that they all had different tones, because they all had different directors behind them, the good ones anyway. I mean, directors like, what made Tim Burton's Batman movies so distinct when they came out? Apart from the fact that he took Batman back to his darker roots and sort of wiped away the memory of the Adam West Batman, is that Tim Burton has a very distinct visual style. And that's on display in his Batman movies, particularly Batman Returns. It's a very distinct, it's not just Batman taken out of the comic book and put on the big screen. It's Tim Burton's Batman. Just like when Joel Schumacher took over with Batman Forever. Joel Schumacher's Batman was a very distinct Batman, different from Tim Burton's. It had his distinct style. And because it was distinct, it wasn't the same thing, that gave it some value. And you look at the other comic book movies that came later, look at Steve Norrington's Blade, and then when Guillermo del Toro did Blade 2, his Blade was different. It's very distinct visually, because Guillermo del Toro is a different director with a different style, so the movie had value. You had Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, you had Bryan Singer's X-Men, you even had Ang Lee's Hulk. It was a very distinct Hulk. It was Ang Lee's version of the Hulk. It wasn't just the Hulk taken out of the comic book with no style attached to it. It was his version of the Hulk, because Ang Lee is a real director. So that means the movie has value. I mean, it has far more value than any of the Marvel movies that have started since Iron Man. Ang Lee's Hulk has some validity because it had a real director behind it. I mean, these Marvel Studios pictures have no style whatsoever. They all could have been directed by the same person, and you wouldn't even know it. I mean, there are some directors I'm not a fan of, like Wes Anderson or Quentin Tarantino or Zack Snyder. I'm not fans of these guys, but they do have distinct styles. I watch their film and I can tell I'm watching their film. And that's better than a director that has no style whatsoever. I mean, it's like comparing Superman Returns to Man of Steel. Superman Returns was Bryan Singer probably at his hackiest, just basically trying to emulate Richard Donner's Superman, except with CGI. He didn't have any imagination whatsoever. He was just trying to repeat what Richard Donner had already done, reusing the music and everything, and trying to even be in continuity with Richard Donner's Superman. Whereas Man of Steel, although I'm not a fan of Man of Steel was something different. Man of Steel, Zack Snyder, visually it was different, tonally it was different. It more emphasized the alien aspect of Superman. Although I didn't like the film, it was not the same thing, so therefore it had more value than Superman Returns had. Zack Snyder's films are visually distinct. I mean, he can't tell a story to save his life, he doesn't understand characters, but at least visually they have some value in that regard. And the ridiculous success of these Marvel movies ultimately is bad for the film industry, because filmmakers make bad films that are successful. That means they don't learn anything. I mean, Michael Bay is probably the best example of that. Michael Bay's movies made so much money that and because they made so much money, it just enabled him to keep doing what he was always doing before. So therefore, he never developed as a filmmaker. The Transformers movies just got worse and worse and worse. And just like when you thought it really couldn't get worse after the first one, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse because he never learned anything as a filmmaker. He was being enabled by the audience. Audiences that hate movies, because Michael Bay understands his audience. His audience doesn't come to see a movie because they love movies. People who went to go see Transformers movies went to go see it because they were fans of the property. The same reason that people would go see these Marvel movies, because they're fans of the property. The movies don't matter. It's not the filmmaking or anything. They're just fans, and they feel obligated to give their money to these people and make these movies successful. And in doing so, they're just they're just crapping over the whole of film history. And they don't care because they don't even like movies. I mean, this whole Marvel, Pixar, Star Wars assembly line production process just irritates me so much. Because, I mean, it gives actors a lot of steady work. Because we see so many, it's on this, as I said, that line between movies and television, these franchises operate like television because we see so many big movie stars going to television and having their own shows because television is steady work. Signing on for these movies is steady work because everybody knows the movies are going to be successful. So people sign on for 5, 6, 7 picture deals, and they're going to have work for years to come because everybody knows the movie is going to be successful. Everyone is so cynical about the whole thing. I mean, the fans of these movies, it's like a yearly ritual for them. Entering another universe, entering the Star Wars universe once a year, entering the Marvel universe 2 or 3 times a year. These people are totally separated from reality. I said the fans of these Marvel Studio pictures are no different than Trump supporters. They live in a totally different universe, cut off from reality, a culture of just incredible stupidity. A culture, like you might say that because these movies are successful, if I say to them I don't like the movies or I say the movie is bad, that means that I'm a troll. I'm giving reasons why. I'm not just saying it's bad for no reason. And yet these people in their response, because I'm sure that anybody who's listening to this that loves Marvel Studios is like, shut up, throwing profanities and everything at me, even though I'm being rational. Their culture is like the culture of Trump supporters. In response, if you criticize Trump, they're just going to throw hate at you. If you criticize Marvel Studios, they're just going to throw hate at you. Or throw the box office at you, as if that means anything. I mean, this Marvel Cinematic Universe may be the greatest con in Hollywood history. Because they've gotten so much money out of the public while putting so little effort into it. And audiences don't care. Because people who go to the movies nowadays are children. Adolescents, young adults, not adults. I mean, older people don't go to the movies anymore. That's the only reason why these movies could be so successful. I mean, 20, 30, 40 years ago, adults went to the movies, and they didn't go to see movies just because they were fans of the properties that the movie was based on. And audiences then went to go see a movie. Audiences today don't go to the theater to see a movie. They go to consume a product that they've been told that they should want to consume. The fans of these Marvel movies hate film. They hate film just like Trump fans hate democracy. Trump is infallible to his supporters just like Marvel is infallible to its supporters. I mean, it's pathetic. And it's destroying film. I mean, and that's why I'm posting this, because it irritates me so much. And I had to get it out of my chest. I mean, today, this week at work, I had to put up with a guy that I hardly ever speak to, leaning over to me and asking me if I saw Endgame. As if I care. I wonder why he assumed that I would want to see it. Like it's something, he just assumes that everybody wants to see these crappy Marvel movies. I have no interest in seeing this stuff. I mean, on Facebook, I looked at there was a Facebook page called African History Network. A page that's supposed to be all about, posting things about anything going on regarding African people the world over. And yet, for some reason, the people running that page basically promoted seeing the Avengers. Because of the success of, I'm sure primarily because of their being brainwashed into loving Black Panther, that they feel obligated to tell anybody who's following that page to go see Avengers. As if you're supporting black people by going to see Avengers. I mean, it's stupidity. I mean, Black Panther, just because the movie had black people in it doesn't mean the movie was pro-black. I mean, the message of politically, these Marvel movies are all the same. They all have the same message. The same, and Black Panther had reiterated the same anti-black message that every other Marvel movie reiterated. Just by who the villain was. And then ultimately, the conclusion, basically saying that any black person that is politically who thinks politically and wants to change the structure of the society, and the power dynamic is evil and should be killed. And the hero is a person that kills them. And yet for some reason black people were convinced that Black Panther is pro-black in some way. I mean, it's ridiculous. And you tell him, and this page frequently posts stuff about black economics and how we should spend our money, and yet you're going to tell me that I should give white people running Marvel Studios my money to go see Avengers Endgame? I mean, it is complete insanity. I mean, God, it is really, really disturbing. Film is not television. Film is supposed to be a creative art form. The film is supposed to be expanding people's minds. These Marvel movies appeal to the same people who sit, like I said, television people who just sit in front of the TV all day watching sitcoms and reality TV, getting fat and dumber all day, every day. People, lazy-minded people, are people who obsess over these crappy movies. People who don't think. People that just consume. Film expands people's minds. Quality films. People who are trying to reinvent the form of how a story can be told. That's what filmmaking is supposed to be about. Marvel Studios is anti-cinema. Just like Pixar is anti-cinema. These new Star Wars movies are anti-cinema. I feel like they're made by committee, not made by real directors. That's why Marvel never hires quality directors to make the movies. They only hire directors they can push around. That's why Edgar Wright didn't work out for Marvel, because he's a real director. They only hire no-name guys that they can push around, and everything is made by committee. So the movies all look the same stylistically, all tie together, and it is just, it's one of the worst things that has happened to film. And it will take a film a long time to recover from this. When they've done milking audiences for every cent they possibly can, maybe 20 years from now these movies might stop. But at this point, I am pretty much done with comic book movies, Marvel and DC, all of them. I much rather watch these animated comic book movies than the live action ones, because live action ones are all exactly the same. They have no inspiration whatsoever, and are clearly a con. Audiences are just being conned. And I just had to get that out of my chest. It baffles me, really. I mean, even when people talk about the direction, when I hear people talking about an episode of like Game of Thrones and talk about how great the direction was, and like the last episode of Game of Thrones, the Battle of Winterfell, is one of the better episodes in recent memory. The better episodes of the shows tend to be the episodes that have big battles in them. But even that episode, as grand as it felt, still paled in comparison to Helm's Deep in Lord of the Rings, because television does not compare to film. I mean, this is the 8th season, and they've been building up this White Walker storyline for 8 years, and then when it finally happens, they basically build it up and end it in one episode. There was no way it was not going to be anticlimactic, because television is designed to be anticlimactic. Television is not designed to satisfy. And when this season is over of Game of Thrones, audiences will not be satisfied when it's over. You can't be satisfied, because that's the whole point. I've never heard of a TV show ever that has had a satisfying conclusion. Because television is all about just milking the audience for every cent, from every cent they can, year after year, and then just ends. And the audience is left like, what? That's it? That's what television is for. Film is supposed to satisfy the audience in the end. And it baffles me, the idea that anybody could be satisfied by anything that Marvel Studios is doing. Because I would argue it's not about satisfying the audience. It's about stretching this out and milking these properties for every cent they possibly can. And the audiences will do it with big smiles on their faces because they don't care about movies. They don't care about the art form. They see film as just something that's supposed to be consumed on a yearly basis. Like I say, a culture of stupidity. Stupidity on the level of Trump and his supporters. People talk about the decline of the political landscape with Trump. When I say the Marvel Cinematic Universe epitomizes the decline of film culture. And that's all I have to say about that. this post is mostly for me, but if anyone else got anything out of it, I'm glad. But I just had to get this out of my system because this really been bothering me. That's all I have to say. Thanks for listening. Bye.